ALITE, ACDJ.
What up? Episode 2, we made it!
Yeah, this is the 90s podcast.
Welcome to the 90s.
For life in the 90s.
Good. It's a really good year that we stumbled upon last year, and still, in true high praise production fashion, we don't have ping pong balls. I was actually going to get them when we went on the road.
It's a recession.
So we'll find.
It ain't easy.
It's hard. China shut down. It's Chinese New Year. Right? I don't know how to say that. You know what? How many times have you learned how to say
Go and pay to it. Oh my
you
goodness.
actually know it?
Well, I mean, since elementary school.
Yeah, same, and I forget it every year.
And I bet you I'm not saying it properly either.
No, we were
Just
never
someone's out there finding it on you like you jackass.
But you know what's so cool about that though is when you meet a Chinese person who wants to teach you how to say that, they're so fucking proud. They teach you that, right?
Well, isn't that a thing of all cultures? When they teach, like for brown people, we love teaching white people swear words.
Sure.
It's like a badge of honor for a white person.
Mexicans are the same.
Brown swear words.
Yeah. It seems every person of color loves to teach their other people their swear words.
Weird thing.
Right?
Well, because brown people love swear words.
Brings us together.
We use the F word lots.
Yes.
Yes.
What we got on today's show? We're doing 1993.
93. Amazing year.
It's a good year.
Amazing year for me because I was like just becoming a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And the world was like wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think people understand the freedom that you had as a teenager in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Repercussions weren't a thing, whether they were public or digital. It wasn't a thing because we didn't have digital.
Sure, we didn't.
No social media, nothing to air us out and our behavior out on a regular basis. So the things that we did, we just did. We just did, and we enjoyed the moments, and they were just kind of set free. And looking at what my kids live like in this generation, there's nothing that they can do that they can get away with.
Yeah,
even on a tiny scale, just tiny little hop a fence. Little things like that.
Little things.
Yeah, you just can't do anymore. So for me, 1993 was transformative because I finally figured out what kind of person I was going to be for my teenage years.
It was good. What was I? I was like 18, I guess.
Oh, wow.
Well, how old am I? It was 75 to 90s, 15, so almost 18.
Yeah. Wow.
Heavily influenced year, life was fighting. I was a fighter that year.
Damn, so you were like in the heat of it.
I was in professional fighting. I was just graduating high school.
Jeez.
Right? I was on course. And then, life changed in that year for me. Because that was the year I started balling out of control.
Like, you mean basketball balling?
No,
or financially?
Financial balling.
Balling.
It was the baller years. The baller years. The baller years for me is the same like when I see a kid rolling down the street who's an obvious drug dealer or something in this guy, you know what I mean? Like you would just tell, it's just like it smells of 1993.
Yes.
Because, back like you said about getting away with things, and that was, it was sort of the beginning, it was kind of the beginning of cell phone territory.
Yep.
It wasn't really cell phones, so there were cell phones in cars.
And I don't think law enforcement was ready.
Law enforcement was a little bit different back then,
They were a little behind it.
Yeah, they were a little behind it, and they actually didn't have the technology to keep up with the bad guys, but then they got the technology.
Or the task forces didn't have that in place at the time.
I really believe, back then, people were, as weird as this is, they were smarter. I do believe this, even though they didn't have the technology to help them progress. Now we have all the technology to make us look smarter.
Mm-hmm.
But at those times, it was even if you look at music was smarter back then.
Yeah.
The people thought.
More effort.
There was more effort put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Even movies.
Yeah.
Now it's all CGI and there's a ton of special effects.
Yeah, so is that a good thing or a bad thing? What does it do to a creative person?
I think it stopped us.
Yeah.
That's what it did.
I think creative people are going to be creative regardless. The only thing now is I just think more people think they're creative because it's easier to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it is. It's a lot easier to do. Even make a fucking poster.
Simple.
Right? Back in the day, in the 90s, you want to make a poster. Okay, I want to make a poster and I want to put it out for people to see, right? Like Missing Cat.
Yeah.
Any school dance poster.
Yeah.
That shit was hard.
Yeah, hours of work.
Hours of work to make a poster.
Can you imagine that?
The cutting out things and putting the numbers and writing it out, that's all the option you had. And if you wanted to print it at Staples, it was $50, $100.
Oh geez, you gotta travel now.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have a car, you gotta get on the bus.
brutal.
And this took probably 8 seconds.
Yeah. Right? It's so crazy that now you can go on like sites like Canva or, you know, you go on your Mac or whatever and just do whatever. You know, like to make a poster.
If you have a high-end printer, you're set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a high-end kid to fucking help you figure that stuff out. Right? At first.
Yeah, so, and the thing is for me, all the drug dealers back then that I knew, have cleaned up their money and are now successful.
Yeah.
So are pillars of the community.
Yeah, so much.
Contributing in great ways to politicians.
Dude.
And it's all gravy because in the 90s, they got away with it.
And it's true because in the 90s too, people got to remember, like I think it was close to 90, the year we're doing today, 93, but it was close where there were a lot of acts and human acts that were enacted in these early 90s. Which we'll cover eventually one day in the podcast, but like a lot of people started getting rights and women started getting rights, and we started kind of taking a more ethical approach to life. Like we're like, maybe we should, stop people from, doing these things to animals, or it all started in the 90s.
It's all the artists. It's all the artists, though, right? Mm-hmm. The artists at the time created the culture of change that started these revolutions. Yeah.
93. It's a good year, man, for rap. All right, you want to start us off? Want to introduce us here and through 1993?
This is the 90s ride. And I'm ALITE. And this is Mikey Olton. ACDJ. Many names, man, many names.
Many names.
And since we're talking about 90s hip hop, it's only appropriate that we jump off with probably the most influential rapper of the 90s. Really nothing like him ever in hip hop again since. Mm-hmm. Why don't you show the face that we're talking about?
Oh, wait a sec. We got these in a different order.
Oh, right, we do.
Yeah.
Oh, right, so we're starting from the top.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Welcome to the 90s.
Welcome to the 90s. One of the most interesting things about the 90s was the ability for people to smoke cigarettes wherever they wanted to. It was an astonishing thing.
Yeah.
When I look back at videos and movies from the 90s and there's people smoking in events, in restaurants, in their cars, with kids in the back seat, cigarettes were one of the most normalized practices of the 90s.
Everybody smoked.
It was cool.
Everybody.
It was cool, and it was the stylish thing to do. The ads had adults holding cigarette smokes.
Yeah.
So this event, January 1st, one of the most monumental events for kids moving forward, cigarettes were banned from being advertised. And the New York City Metro Transit Authority, is that what they call it? Their MTA, they banned cigarette ads. And if you've never been to New York, you've never been to the subway system, you can't really understand the magnitude of what that is, because New York's subway system is like its own little city. Have you been to New York?
I have never been.
So when you get to the subway system, it's its own little city. There's vendors, there's...
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the craziest experience you can have if you've never been to New York, is to see it. So the fact that they banned cigarettes created a trend moving forward that cigarettes weren't going to be accepted as regularly as they were before.
Oh, wow.
Were you ever a cigarette smoker?
Yes, I was, but I quit for my current girlfriend, wife, owner right now. I quit for her, man. I was that old kind of Rocky Marciano fighter. I was a boxer who smoked, and it didn't affect me. And I just went, you know what? She doesn't smoke. I like her. I'll just quit smoking. Never look back.
So you have a strong disposition when it comes to that.
Yeah, I smoked to be cool back in the day, right? I smoked as you grew up, and there was nothing else to do until you discovered marijuana. Right, so you have a fucking you do whatever you could to try to get a $1.50 back then to buy a package of cigarettes.
Yeah,
it was about $1.50, $2.
Wow, really, eh?
Yeah, so that's what they were.
How old were you when those that cheap?
Hold on a sec, Alexa. How much were cigarettes in Canada in 1993? Okay.
Alexa don't know shit.
They were about yeah, she doesn't, does she? They were about $2, I'd say. And wow. I remember, it's so weird to think that it was $2, and here I was, a kid going to buy cigarettes and try to scrape together a couple bucks for cigarettes.
You know what's weird?
It's weird to think that.
So we had a mutual friend, my older brother had a friend that his parents owned a convenience store on 49th and Fraser, for people that grew up in Southeast Vancouver. And it was one of these, they called them like the 24-hour stop. It was like a knockoff 7-Eleven. And me and my friends used to just statute of limitations are passed, by the way. We would go in and we would steal cigarettes.
Yeah.
Packs of cigarettes. You know how the cash register,
really easy.
and then it was like, they had this little display set up,
Yes.
and the guy would have to reach into the thing.
Yeah.
So one of us would distract him on one side, and then the other one would just grab handfuls of cigarettes and put them in bags. And then we'd go sell them to other teenagers that couldn't get cigarettes.
Yeah. Do you remember how much you were selling them for?
$6.
$6.
Yeah.
Because it might have been more than $2. I'm trying to think, like, it's been a long time for me.
Yeah,
so
and we just stacked high school cash.
Yeah.
But cigarettes were like a commodity for teenagers, because so many teenagers want to smoke.
It was so cool.
I never partook, thankfully, but yeah, man, it was like the thing.
Yeah,
Everyone
I smoked
had
for like
back.
4 years.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but just like everything else in my life, I quit. Right?
But this was one of the things that was worth quitting.
It was worth quitting. I quit for love. Right?
Like most people do.
Yeah, which was good. Right? But yeah, I remember that. And I remember, even going back before that, I remember, and this is something that kids nowadays won't even believe. One, there was no age on buying cigarettes.
Yeah.
Up until 98, there was no age.
That's crazy. Yeah, I used to go buy them for my grandparents. Like, I had a grandparent that smoked cigarettes. And I forgot about that.
Nobody questioned you up to about, I think, 97, 98. And then I think and then it changed and said, okay, you have to be 18.
Well, we had a corner store called Suburban Markets back in the day.
Mm.
And he would make me get a note from my dad, if I was buying for my dad. That he signed it saying that you're right?
Yeah.
But see, and another thing about that era is that other adults could tell you what to do when you were a kid.
Yeah.
You didn't have to belong to them.
Yeah, that's true.
They could just tell you you're not behaving right, and as a kid you'd be like, oh shit. Okay.
They could touch you. They could grab you.
Yeah, and it wasn't a big, and I don't think people understand how significant that is, because now when you imagine someone coming up to a teenager now that's not their parent and telling them something. You would get told to go,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey Alexa, how many people smoke in New York? I didn't ask you that. Alexa, how many people smoke cigarettes in New York City?
In the United States, it's big.
That's smoking there, right?
Wow.
So that's today.
And that's admit it.
And that admit it, right?
Yeah.
So back in '93, cutting off this, you were only maybe marketing to a small group of people. Like, it wasn't a large fraction of people.
Yeah.
If you look at the statistics, well, maybe more people smoke less now.
Well, and another thing is this was advertisement. There was really no other ways to advertise outside of this and TV.
Yeah.
So you would put stuff on subways and newspapers and things like that. That was the only way you would get media.
Yeah.
Now you can ignore all subway ads. You can ignore completely because you're always on your device.
Yeah.
You don't even look at what's surrounding you. Think about, you don't take transit, right?
No.
So for people that take transit, they would never know what ads are on the SkyTrains because everybody's on their phone the whole time.
Yes.
But back in the day, I read every single one around it. Yeah.
I remember those.
You had no other option. You see that?
Nothing else.
Look out the window.
It's like reading the shampoo bottle when you're taking it. Now you gotta just read the shampoo, Exaloxalon, and right? It's like, I'm just so informed. That's my most informative part of my day.
Yeah, and speaking of information, this next person is extremely influential. Worldwide.
It's weird to think he started in the 90s. Like, that's how old we are, dude.
Well, one of the most, revolutionary personalities in radio, not just because of what he said, but because of what he did. The things that he would do, the stunts that he would pull in his radio station, he would bring on adult entertainment stars to do sexual acts in the radio station at the time. This was unprecedented, unheard of.
Yeah.
January 11th, Howard Stern's radio show begins in Buffalo, New York. And the reason that's monumental now is because in this era, he is still the highest paid radio personality.
Is he really?
But on satellite radio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he brokered the biggest satellite radio deal in the history of satellite radio. He's just designed to speak to all generations.
Yeah. He's a pretty amazing guy. And I don't know if he's had any kind of dirt or anything. Has anything really happened?
Well, I mean, he's been so out there, there's really nothing you can put against him because he doesn't care at all about how his personal life plays out. His first divorce played out extremely public. He doesn't care.
Yeah.
He has no shame.
I remember when he came on the radio back then, and I think back then it was harder to listen to him. Like you had to have some sort of I don't know if it was satellite radio.
No, not back then. No, you would have had to have. Well, in BC you couldn't get it.
No, it was like you had to listen to it. I can't remember how we heard it back then. Crazy! Was it rebroadcasted?
So it would have been rebroadcast. Yeah.
I remember because you would hear it, and it would be like on anything like you've never heard before.
Yeah.
Like people were, the shit they were doing, Baba Booey, and right at the beginning, and then out on the street doing stuff. Like all the guys today, the Kimmels and those guys, they took a lot of their stuff.
He paved the way.
A Howard Stern show.
Well, and he was completely uncensored on the radio.
Yeah.
He was chaos.
Yeah.
Right? And I wasn't able to get in my hand on any of the material, so I didn't really know who he was until the movie came out, Private Parts. And then you could see who he was and what he was about. But he was kind of like Jackass, Borat, and all of these things before those things. He was the original public troll.
Yeah, he was great.
And he trolled everybody extremely hard, so huge impact on radio then and on radio now. He's an icon.
So radio now, though, I mean, it's all satellite radio now. I mean, there's, I do listen to talk radio. That's what I listen to.
Kind of the last gasps of terrestrial radio, I'd say, is talk radio.
Yeah, how much longer do you think radio will be here? Like, even podcasting. Like, podcasting is this new form of radio programming, pretty much, right? And even all these guys, he does a show, he does his podcast, right? He does
he does a podcast.
So, I mean, like, maybe podcast kills the radio star.
Well, I think communication is going to be needed forever. So I don't think radio will ever die forever. Like die, because it's too easy for people to broadcast.
Yeah.
So even if the stations die, FM is still a signal that's out there that people can use. So I think people always use it.
Yeah, I read a stat like there are more podcasts than radio shows.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, because people are connected to their apps, and the apps will give you all the related content constantly. Back then, you had to find it. You had to find him if you wanted to listen to it.
Yeah, you really did.
You had to find your personalities. There was no PVR. There was no recording. You had to time your days around your personalities.
Oh, that's right.
So if your personality was on at 8 p.m., you had to make sure that you were not having plans, not going anywhere, at home to watch your person.
Yeah.
Through the commercials.
Yeah, and the commercials.
Whatever it was, through whatever your media, personality was at the time, you had to set up your day around them. And TV Guide showed you the way.
I remember the worst TV Guide.
Didn't they have TV Guide? Well, there's no need for it, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like yellow pages and white pages that we used to use.
TV Guide was golden.
Oh, it was everything.
When TV Guide,
it was everything.
I didn't realize the value of subscription.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't realize it growing up. I was like, whatever, you order something. And now as an adult, I'm like, subscription. It's a big responsibility.
Right,
and it's like, and you're so invested in whatever it is you subscribe to, right? And I took for granted that about TV Guide.
Yeah.
My parents would get it, and I was like, okay, whatever, it's just a TV Guide. No, dude. Yeah, I didn't realize it.
It was the keys to the kingdom of entertainment.
I wish I would have kept all the TV guides when I got them in pristine condition and had them now.
So for people that are outside of this generation, a TV Guide was a little book magazine that would get sent to your home once a week. And it would give you the week's worth of programming.
On point.
All the shows that were going to be on, what channel they were going to be on, what time, and the more popular shows would even have little descriptions beside them.
Yeah.
And you would literally have to plan your week around what TV Guide told you.
Yes.
It was incredible.
It was incredibly precise.
Yeah.
It knew.
Yeah.
To me, what amazed me about TV Guide is it knew what show was coming on what time. And it knew if there was a scheduled change.
Yeah.
It knew what show was going to be in that scheduled change.
Without a hiccup. And I think that also is a testament to celebrities back then, that their contracts and what their obligations were mandatory.
Yeah, they were definitely.
You had to get there.
Oh, yeah.
Now celebrities can flake and disappear whenever they feel like, because they are the product.
Yeah, they are.
And they understand that.
Yeah, and
he kind of paved the way for that.
He did, man. Well, he also was the one that asked the celebrities about their sex lives. And, he was the one that kind of opened that door to making, asking that uncomfortable question.
Unflinching.
Right?
Yeah.
And, the fact that he had the first ever black radio co-host.
Which is phenomenal.
was revolutionary. It was a woman, she was black, Robin, and it was a big deal.
Yeah, he's been great. He's been great to the civil rights movement for sure. Yeah, he's been an ally definitely over the years.
And it's, it's different. He's really built his brand and continued to keep it going. And just this is just testimony about what I say about if you can talk, you will always have opportunity.
And he also in infamy told Trump that his daughter was a nice piece of ass.
Oh, he did.
Just like that. Yeah. And then he said, and then he asked Trump, "Can I say that?" And Trump's like, "Yeah, that's fine."
Oh,
what?
Wow.
What?
Ruthless.
You can find this online. You know you can.
It's ruthless.
Yeah.
All right. These four men here. No, these are not pictures of my father, my uncle. I feel like I
hope not.
No, hell no.
I hope not. Four of the most infamous faces. It's incredible that this event is what kicked off probably the most revolutionary change to people's rights in the streets.
Oh yeah.
The Rodney King beating was one of the most traumatic experiences for people of color across North America. Mm-hmm. We heard about police brutality a lot through music. NWA had already done Fuck the Police, and there were a lot of rappers now speaking out about police brutality. We had heard it in the past from the Black Panthers and Fred Hampton and people that were fighting in the streets before, but they didn't have a media outlet that allowed them to speak to everybody. NWA changed that. This event in 1993, February the 3rd, so infamous.
I remember it.
Yeah, these four cops got put onto trial for assaulting Rodney King. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just an assault, it was an ass kicking. And it just so happened that there was somebody there with a camcorder.
Crazy.
Camcorder. Yeah. Camera on the shoulder. And happened to record the violence that broke out, and these four cops assaulted Rodney King, who was pulled over or pulled out of his vehicle for something that didn't equate to the kind of violence he received.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and they beat him pretty much to an inch of his life.
Yeah. And
if you show the picture that's coming up next of his impact to his face and body, they beat him with nightsticks like he was a piñata on the ground, helpless, over and over again, while he begged for his life. And April 16th, when they were tried, a jury reached a verdict where 2 of them were found guilty and 2 of them were found not guilty of assault, even though all 4 of them beat him. They didn't announce the sentence or the verdict until the next day, which is August the 17th. And I think every single person of color that was invested in this trial watched with bated breath as to what the outcome was going to be. Do you remember seeing this?
Oh yeah.
The day it happened?
So this happened, the beating happened years before. Mm-hmm. And we were here talking about America and due process. And it took them like 2 years to get to a verdict.
Yeah.
And I remember all that, man. I remember the Rodney King going on TV and saying to everybody, can we just get along?
Yeah.
Right? Remember that?
Can't we all just get along?
He was wearing that fly little, that fly number fucking Morris Day suit, right? With the Jerry curl.
Yeah.
Right? He came on that and he was like, can we all just, he had a little twitch. Get along.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing the video, and what I remember about the video was, holy crap, someone got a video. Mm-hmm. Remember how crazy it was to see a video back then that wasn't media?
Yeah.
And this is how crazily we were manipulated and controlled by media back then. Mm-hmm. This was the first time ever a video shot by another person that captured a major event was put on the news.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything before that. If I'm forgetting something, let me know. Mm-hmm. Because this was the first one I remember, and it was so groundbreaking for all nationalities. Mm-hmm. Not just people of color, but all nationalities. Because one, if you were black, there was a poor black man getting beaten. Mm-hmm. 2, if you were white, oh my God, we're exposed.
Mm-hmm. Like it actually happens.
And
the worst part is, living in Canada at the time, that's what I thought. Like, oh my God, these guys aren't lying. Rap music is not lying. This shit happens to them. It's a normal thing.
And then no one's ever got it. Dude, to have video of this, it wasn't just hold on, I got off the phone. I think there's a cop beating happening. I think I'm gonna film it. It wasn't like that. It was like, okay, where's the cord? Okay, where's the battery?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
I had to be prepared.
Get up, oh man. Yeah. I gotta turn it on, wait for it to go on. Come on. Go zoom. Okay, push record. Like, it was like that. So the guy got it.
So can you imagine how long the beating was going on for? The fact that the beating was going on for that long of a period of time, and this guy still had to have enough time to be able to get his camera ready and record another few minutes of him getting beat.
Yeah, it's brutal. And it changed the history of our world.
Well, I think the worst part is living in Canada, and really up until that time, there weren't a lot of black people, at least in the schools that I went to. The elementary school that I went to was all brown people and Chinese people. There weren't really any black students. So seeing it happen, you kind of made it all really, really real.
Yeah.
And the day that they said that 2 of them were acquitted, in my household, all I remember, everybody in the house was like, oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy, that city's gonna burn.
Yeah.
That everybody knew it. Everybody knew a non-guilty verdict meant that city was going to burn down. And it happened.
Yeah, it did.
In the most dramatic of ways. Wow. The LA riots have some of the most dramatic footage of violence in the city that I can ever remember seeing in my life.
And, you know, when you watch that video, I looked at it again the other day when we were talking about this, and I'm like, wow, I'm looking at it, like all the helicopter angles they got, like, that was when people don't realize this. No, it wasn't until the LA riots that newspaper helicopters started happening. That shit didn't happen back before that. Like, this is why this was so historical, is because it started a lot of things that we just kind of take for granted now, like police or like news helicopters filming everything. Like, you couldn't go on the ground if you were a white reporter. You were toasted. Look at the truck driver, Reginald Dennis.
Reginald Denny,
Right, he got taken from.
I will never forget that.
Yeah. The
fire extinguisher and the brick. It was such a shocking thing to see.
Sad.
Streets break out in violence like this.
Oh, yeah.
So many neighborhoods burned down.
The looting.
Yeah, and again, I think this is one of those things when you have a leaderless movement, there's just chaos. Now they're able to direct the anger. Like, I remember at one point they had the LAPD trapped in LAPD headquarters. They had the whole building surrounded, and all the LAPD were trapped in the building. Yeah. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I don't.
They had everybody was backed up into their building, and they were like launching chairs and stuff. That would have been a step towards something phenomenal if they were able to capitalize on that. But again, leaderless movements create chaos, and this was a largely leaderless, angry, chaotic movement.
And this was really the beginning of the 90s revolution of change. Because, you know, what we have today with Black Lives Matters or any other of these groups that are fighting for change would be nowhere without incidents like this. Because these are the incidents that sparked revolution again.
Yeah.
For too many years, people of color, black people in the States, were getting settled down by sports, entertainment, music, where they were given these bones.
At minimal growth.
But here's this bone. You want rap music? Okay, yeah, go ahead, right? It's cool. We'll let my white kid buy your rap music, right? Don't worry. Right? And it was these were ways of keeping people down for years and years. The 90s was famous for that, dude. When black culture blew up with music in the 90s, it was a suppression movement more so than a growth movement. Right? I think and I believe that it wasn't until we really started getting focused on protesting that movement started to happen and real change started to happen. But it was incidents like this that were a spark.
And to think that this is 1993.
93.
We're in 2021, which means 30 years, and we're still fighting the same battle. George Floyd was killed in 2020.
Progress.
This is not old, and this is not dying. The movement is just being televised more.
Oh yeah. And even we start getting into the OJ situation, we start getting into more of the riots and rises, right? And I think what would be cool is we are able to track and we just see all of the incidents that happen. And you'll start seeing them happen closer and closer together, right?
Yeah. And there's a lot of there's a lot of relation between these events, right? Even some of the events we talk about today, there's a lot of correlation between these events.
Time. Yeah. So the Rodney King. What happened with Rodney King anyway?
I don't think he really went on to do anything bad going forward. He just kind of went to try to
harm the album or anything.
I know he did a lot of public speaking in a lot of those police brutality kind of symposiums that they would have. He would be one of the people that would come up and do a lot of public speaking. So I think he did do a lot of that afterwards, but
I bet if the cops pulled him over, they're like, "Oh shit,
Sorry, sir. Please."
But now he'd have the ultimate weapon in his hand, right? The camera's ready to go.
You know, he kind of, in a weird way, he was given the ultimate opportunity, and I think he dropped the ball personally. I think he was given the ultimate opportunity to step up and be a leader and to be that guy. He could have been that guy.
Well, the thing is that's not for everybody, right? Not everyone's meant to lead. I don't know what his life was like before that, but he didn't really have a life that was outstanding.
He was that guy.
Yeah, so
it's just too bad. Like, you know, you put yourself in that situation, right? Like, you get pulled off and beaten and put in the film. Like, you see it all the time now.
It's terrifying.
You know what's weird is that back then we see it. It's a major trial for people on trial.
Yeah.
Nowadays you see it, man.
Oh, we're desensitized completely.
Cops maybe get charged. You don't hear about it.
No.
You know, oh, that's wrong. Yes, we agree it's wrong. We're suspending them with pay.
Yeah. Go have a vacation, come back.
Right? They're gonna be sitting on a desk.
Yeah. No more street assaults for you.
No more street. We're gonna make them.
Now you're just gonna cover up the assaults for other cops that are beating
undercover on Instagram.
Shit doesn't change is what we're trying to say.
Oh, dude. Yow! Buddy, listen, I want to tell you something. I really loved this guy when I was growing up. This was part of my rocker
makes sense.
days.
Makes sense.
Might as well jump! Jump! Wow!
I know that one song.
You know that one song? Yeah. Tell everyone about this guy. I'll tell them about them.
David Lee Roth arrested for $10 worth of cannabis products.
How much was that then?
Oh, jeez. That would be like maybe a gram?
You think so?
Yeah, this is because you got to remember this is 1993, right?
So the price of weed hasn't changed in
I don't
30
think
years.
it's been that much.
There's no inflation on weed.
Maybe a tiny bit.
On the pound level, yes. But
Maybe.
it seems that on the gram level, it's
It's
always
the
10.
same.
How is that scientifically possible? That the pound has gone up, but the gram has stayed the
We
same.
could be completely wrong, but he was arrested for having $10 worth of cannabis. Now imagine any celebrity that you know of today,
Anyone.
in today's day and age, that would have $10 worth of cannabis and be arrested and not tell the cop to go fuck themselves.
Oh, I would tell the cop, you're going to arrest me for $10 a weed? You're wasting taxpayers' money. I'm going to do an instant Facebook Live.
Do you want to know what the most insane thing is? This happened in New York City.
Yeah.
New York City, it's still illegal.
It's still
illegal in New York City to have cannabis products. They're supposed to be voting, and New Jersey just legalized, just recently legalized. But New York City still has no plan to legalize cannabis products.
Unbelievable.
So speak on David Lee Roth, because you would know his history a little bit better than me.
David Lee Roth smokes a lot of weed, and he, in fact, back in the day, so this is really interesting. Back in the day, the rockers, like the glam rockers and all the rockers that were, the 80s, early 80s, late 70s, 80s, they didn't smoke weed. It wasn't a really big thing on the circuit.
Makes sense.
It wasn't a very highly exposed fucking thing back then, right? So back then it was drinking, drugs, you did the hard drugs, cocaine, smoking cigarettes, right? Like drinking.
Destructive shit.
Destructive shit. Weed smoking wasn't a big thing. The reason why it started to become is that a lot of these bands started touring in Canada. And David Lee Roth and Van Halen would start their tours in Vancouver. And then they would go across the country, and then they would go, right?
That's amazing.
So they got exposed to marijuana because of coming to Canada on tour.
Incredible.
Yeah, and so a lot of it, what would happen is that they would come up and they'd be like, okay, I will come up, $50,000, and we need a pound of weed, a pound of the BC bud. David Lee Roth moved here to Vancouver for that reason. He was a heavy weed smoker.
Wow.
Been smoking for 40 plus years, right? He actually taught a lot of rock stars how to smoke weed because they would go on tour with him. This is true. They would go on tour with Van Halen, and all the guys in Van Halen are smoking weed. And the guys are like, what? You ever hear of a band called Skid Row?
Yes.
Okay, so their lead singer, Sebastian Bach, opera singer. Guy's fucking amazing. Probably one of the best voices.
Oh, wow.
Purest voices in rock, right? So they went on tour with David Lee Roth once, and I can't remember the total details of this, but David Lee Roth is like, he's like, what are you, guy's like, what are you smoking? He said, I'm smoking some BC bud. Got him smoking it. He was hooked from the start.
Wow.
From his very first dope, he never stopped smoking, right? And he was just like, wow, it just relaxed him after the gig. All fucking wound up and smoked weed, right? He got totally baked. It was a bad experience, but he kept smoking, right? Like, and so, yeah, it's because of David Lee Roth that a lot of guys were going.
Be proud. Be proud of your BC bud, y'all.
So, in regards to getting busted for weed in New York City, there are hundreds of people in prison in the New York state that are in prison for weed smoke.
Yes.
For weed charges.
With long ass terms.
Very long terms.
And non-violent offenses.
And this is where, this is part of the 90s that has to go, man. This prehistoric thinking about weed and about, other things, right? Much and all this feel about drugs. The 90s, people, you remember, it was like the war on drugs was still in full swing.
Big. They had commercials about it.
Yeah, remember?
This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? That bullshit they used to do?
Oh, yeah.
Brainwash? Yeah.
And in 93, there was like, Pablo was still alive.
Early 90s, I think Pablo got caught.
Did he get caught?
Early 90s, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did he get killed? I can't remember.
He got killed.
He got killed in the early 90s.
He was running on the rooftops.
Yeah, running on the rooftops.
Yeah.
And we were just kind of getting exposed really to drugs. Like, you could still get away with things. You could still smuggle things into the country.
Dude, anti-drug commercials were non-stop back then.
Yeah, there were a lot, eh?
Non-stop.
I remember watching cartoons as a kid. And anti-drug commercials would come.
Yeah, there was one where the kid would smoke weed and then he would be like a deflated presidential chair. Yeah. And then the sibling would be like, I just want you to play with me, but you always do drugs, so you can play with me. And they're all like sprawled out of the cars like, what the fuck?
Yeah, I think at that point it was like Saved by the Bell or something.
Right.
Drug shit. Yeah, I read that. But $10, there are guys who went to jail back then, 1993 for $10. And this was a big deal.
Because he was a huge star.
It was big. And it was weird.
Van Halen's massive, right?
Yeah. But you gotta think of like a guy like, what's his name, the Rolling Stone guy got busted for heroin. The other Keith Richards got busted for heroin in Toronto, right? And he was banned from coming back to Toronto. Whatever. But he didn't end up going to jail.
The fact that he's still alive is monumental.
Yeah. But did David Lee Roth go to jail, or what happened?
So they arrested him, and no, he didn't go to jail. But there was some other fuckery involved. With his arrest, but yeah, no, he didn't go to jail.
Throw the book at him! He bought a gram of weed.
10 years in jail.
Why is David Lee Roth buying weed? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, what's your people?
Because I remember Van Halen, they had this rule, no blue M&Ms or something.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, or all blue M&Ms.
Why do people do that shit?
It's a fucking asshole, pompous asshole.
Yeah, that's
you have to buy their own fucking weed. I don't have to buy my own weed.
Yeah.
Right? What does David Lee Roth have to do that for?
Hey, if we have a green room, I'll bring the weed, you just roll it. Because I don't really like it.
Hey, I'm the lead singer Van Halen. I'm just roaming the streets of New York looking for marijuana. Hey, Jesse fucking Smollett. What's that guy's name? Smollett?
Subway is nice.
Just roaming the streets, minding my own business, looking for weed or ass. Alright, here's the next one. Dude, look at those.
It's an incredible sight.
When those were up there, we took them for granted so badly. And I'm not saying about what they stand for, but how beautiful and majestic those buildings are. Like, one of a kind.
It's incredible architecture.
It was. And now, of course, they have bigger buildings and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, man, those were big.
Yeah, I think one thing that the US does well is represent their ego.
Yeah.
And they represent their ego all over their landscape physically.
Yeah.
Just non-stop with their icons and their statues and their buildings and their monuments to themselves, hence American exceptionalism. And when you create these kind of symbols that tower over regular people on a daily basis, eventually those regular people are going to start to feel like that system does not represent what they are and who they are and what they stand for. And multiple attempts have been made on these buildings. Even Notorious B.I.G. rhymed in his raps, time to get paid, blow up like the World Trade. And when he said it, people were like, what? World Trade Center never blew up. It's because this is one of those things that happened that wasn't really talked about too much across the board.
It wasn't really.
No, it wasn't blown up. It wasn't. Nobody remembers this event of 9/11. People, or this bombing of the World Trade Center towers. But 9/11 is synonymous, right? So February 26th, the first real damage occurred to the World Trade Center bombings with a van bomb that was driven into the building in the parking structure. And 6 people were killed and 1,000 people were injured. And up until this point, this was considered the single most damaging terrorist event on US soil. And the shocking thing to me is that moving forward, there was no memorials or events done to remember this escapade in US history.
Weird time.
Yeah, so it was one of those events that happened that kind of reminded the US that you're not immune from these things happening because it was done by an American.
Yeah, that's right.
Somebody that was in the military as well.
And who's still alive and still in prison.
Which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Do you even remember this happening?
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I totally remember. I remember seeing it on the news and being like, wow, like a bomb.
Mm-hmm.
Because at this point in our world, IRA car bombs were going off in Ireland and London.
Yeah.
And people were getting demolished.
That was scary. It was very
Remember
scary.
that?
The body count was massive.
It was unbelievable at this time.
Yeah,
so
crazy.
now that a bomb happened on our soil, the first thing you think about is the IRA. I remember that clearly, like, holy shit, is this like IRA moving over and, you know, like there's this war starting with the Irish and the Italians or something, right? Like, you because, you know, at that point too, you're thinking Goodfellas, Irish, Italian, mafia, mafias are big, you know, so at this point it must be mafia bomb.
For sure.
You're not thinking terrorists. That's not a word in 1993.
Yeah, no, it
There's no
wasn't.
terrorists.
It wasn't.
I don't even remember what they called this, but it wasn't terrorism. It was like, I don't remember. Because Oklahoma City bombing had happened at this point, right?
Timothy McVeigh.
Right, so...
Well, Ted Kaczynski also happened.
And the Unabomber.
Yeah.
Unabomber happened at this point already? So bombs are kind of a thing, and it was all nationalists that were doing this. So was this another national movement? You didn't think that there was any issue in the world with the United States and having issue doing shit right. We didn't even know about behind the scenes. We knew about, you know, Manuel Noriega, and we knew about, you know, the Iran-Contra affair. We knew about secret wars and all that, but we didn't know about terrorism. And America is one of the biggest terrorists in the world. We didn't know this.
Well, I think CIA had better control over it back then because the access to information was way more limited. Yeah, so you could easily create veils up in, you know, people's eyes and reflect whatever version of reality you wanted out there. And they did a great job of it for a long, long time.
Because everybody drank the juice back then. Everybody drank the Kool-Aid about what we were told on the news. And you didn't think about anything else.
Yeah, can you imagine being made to feel patriotic for a country that you don't live in?
Yeah.
Is that weird?
Yeah, it was really weird.
I remember feeling patriotic towards, even like towards Rocky in Rocky 4 against Ivan Drago, the evil Russian. I'm not American, but they created this feeling that, you should be proud to be American wherever you are in the world, right? It's like, what?
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah, about this, we got this picture here. This was the first time, like, this looked like a movie set. Look at that.
Yeah, it's incredible. And there wasn't colossal damage. The building obviously didn't come down. There was some things that need to be rebuilt in the parking area in the first few floors, but nothing like what happened in 9/11.
So they tried to take down the towers in this.
I think that was the goal.
But they also tried because they wanted to set up the big one.
And explosives weren't as good back then.
They weren't very
good. I mean, the people that had access to explosives to do this kind of stuff didn't have access to big bombs.
And I think this was like fertilizer bomb too.
Yeah.
This was a fertilizer bomb.
Yeah.
Right, so...
You're not taking down a building like that.
No.
The fertilizer bomb.
No, this was how many years before 9? So 8 years before 9/11.
Yeah.
So, you know, this happened, probably the same group of people, probably, you know.
Yeah, I mean...
in a weird way.
It's so hard to say because it depends what version of 9/11 you want to believe, right? There's so many versions of 9/11.
So do you think they got the guy, the group that did this, FBI got them, and they got him in a little room like this, and they got information that people were planning something bigger, and that this guy named Bin Laden, who we don't get to know for another couple years after this, you know, he's running around really against you, America, and he's plotting something big. Because by this time, they knew 9/11 was going to happen.
Yeah, I think they knew a version of
The
it.
planners had it already planned, because it had taken them 10 years, right? So by this time in 1993, the people were already in the country training at the airstrip, training to fly planes. And they were trying to work their way into the system, right?
It was people from Saudi Arabia that perpetrated 9/11 at the acceptance of the U.S. government and its armed forces across the country. Bin Laden at this time, according to some of the books that I've read, was working in the Middle East, building bridges, building schools, building infrastructure for countries that didn't have it. He was kind of like a folk hero in the Middle East at this time. This is before the Taliban and the new Afghanistan. And he was kind of making some changes in the Middle East. So I think America created its own bad guys for centuries so that they can continue to perpetuate acts like this against the people.
And then just create and say, fuck it, Bin Laden, you're bad.
Yes.
Really?
It's easy. Because Bin Laden didn't do 9/11. He didn't take credit for 9/11. The passports that were found on the ground after the incineration of the building were from Saudi. The people that they had claimed were on the plane were from Saudi. But Saudi is one of America's biggest allies. They send weapons and planes to Saudi Arabia all the time. So does Canada.
So then they know the truth. Well, then they...
It's a false flag of epic proportions.
It's so sad.
Yeah, it's like Pearl Harbor, same thing, right?
There's so many... I personally, my whole feeling about it is I don't fucking care. Like, I really don't care. Like, I care more about... Even the whole bombing thing, like, it just doesn't really matter. It feels like it's all a lie. And it feels like the more you buy into it, the more you just get fucking brainwashed by it.
There's a lot of people that feel that same way out there, just like you do, man. A lot
It's so
of people.
crazy. Like, it's weird to think it was 20 years ago that 9/11 happened. And, you know, it's still held. Really, the memorials and all the things they do for the first responders, I get it.
They don't do anything,
They
though.
don't.
They don't do anything.
They say they do, you know what I mean?
Dude, thousands of first responders are sick, terminally sick, sick for the rest of their lives, to get no support from the government.
Yeah.
The fact that they have to go to court every year to kind of re-up on their benefits is disgusting. Yeah.
It's really tragic, man. It's so hard to care about something when you don't know the truth about it.
Read between the lines is what we're trying to say.
Yes.
Always.
That's always.
Yeah.
I remember this one too. This was crazy.
This was scary.
Yeah, we're going through 1993 right now. In case you just turned it on.
Yes, 1993.
The
Incredible events of 1993. This was one of the scary ones for me. One of the reasons why is because I grew up in a Muslim household. And when I used to hear of people that imitated Christ or emulated Christ or thought they were Christ, it was kind of scary because part of the tenets of Islam is that Christ returns to earth and fights the fight and destroys Satan, and then everyone lives happily ever after as a Muslim. So when I saw this initially, I'm like, what? Guys claiming to be Christ? I was 13 at the time, turning 14 at the time. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And this led to one of the most dramatic killings.
It was unbelievable.
It was an execution. And it was done by the authorities against essentially innocent people.
Pretty much.
That weren't harming anyone.
They were brainwashed, right, by Buddy.
Yeah, so David Koresh, who had been living as an individual on this campaign of changing the world over to his belief of Christ, started to convince people that he was the second coming of Christ. And he had this compound of people, and they would play music, and he would sleep with everyone's wife.
Yes.
But not let anybody else sleep with.
Pure douchebag. Yeah.
So he was a masochist and egotist and thought he was Christ and had his own life. Now here's the thing, okay? If you're an adult and you're willing to live with Koresh in his compound, and not complain about it, you're okay with the life. Why does anybody else care?
Haters, maybe? I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, he was about the polygamous lifestyle. That was his thing, you know? The only thing that I think contributed to this failure is that Koresh told these men that I can sleep with your wife, but you can't. So I think that's where you kind of lose people, because they're like, well, wait a minute. You get everything? You get all of our wives, and we get nothing? And I think that's when the cracks begin to form. It feels like, yeah, I'll have your wife, you can have her too, kind of thing. Maybe there wouldn't have been so much outrage from
that. That's like reject swinger lifestyle.
Right? You can't just have it all like that.
It's like Caligula. You ever see that movie Caligula?
No, but I know what you're talking about.
Okay, so in Caligula, he would put his fist with the ring inside of the man, and then he would stamp the wedding certificate, and then he would have sex with his wife.
Oof.
I was just like, dude, you're just so crazy. Well, this guy was worse than that, because this guy would have sex with your wife, then talk to everybody about it, right? Yeah. Set an example of what a good Christian you are, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then all the other guys would be like, oh shit, I gotta do that, I guess? It's like, oh, okay. Well, Bob did it, right? And so then he'd sleep with Tim's wife, and it's like, he was the ultimate douche, dude, but he was the guy that where the phrase Jesus juice came from. It's because of them, right? He made them all drink the Jesus juice. Remember, they all went to sleep.
No, you're talking about
was it the different one?
Yeah, you're talking about
the other 90s.
Dude no, this goes further back. This is the dude on the island. He took everybody to that little island, and they all drank the juice and died.
Oh, they did? And then this one was, they were in a compound.
Yeah.
And he held them all hostage. Yeah. And then he shot them?
No.
The cops hated
him.
So
essentially one of them escaped, or left, or whatever you want to call it, and went to the police because he was mad that his wife was being, his wife was gone and all that stuff. So when the FBI first discovered this compound, their goal was to eliminate it immediately because they didn't want the idea of free living to become commonplace.
Oh, wow.
Same thing that they did to the hippies in the 60s and 70s. Any time somebody develops a lifestyle that's not akin to what's normal, they get taken out.
Seems like it.
Yeah, and the difference is with him, he had guns too. So this was a raid that was done against the Koresh in his camp, against this compound. Wow. And it went bad. And they essentially murdered everybody.
Yeah, that seemed like it.
And there were women and kids and other men there as well. And the FBI just had no regard for life.
So then did they start the fire?
Yeah, they burned it down.
So the evidence was gone.
Yeah. And very infamous day in history in 1992, because I remember it created like a real dark cloud around media for a little while, because you didn't really know how to feel about it, because anytime you evoke Jesus' name, you think of peaceful people. So people always had a sympathetic eye to the people there, because anyone, for the most part, people that love Jesus, if you really love Jesus and the idea of Jesus, I'm not a religious person, I'm just saying in general, you're kind of like that love everybody type of person.
You kind of, that goes with it, right?
Yeah, because that's what Jesus was, a hippie. Jesus was a hippie.
Yeah.
Love thy neighbor, turn the other cheek, everybody love everybody. That's kind of his shtick.
Yeah, so. He was, and that's kind of what they try to be, but, you could do that way back in the day. As life evolved, as we evolved, tolerance dissolved.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, it was gone. Like, it's hard to be nice to people all the time. I mean, I've seen Christians lose their... Have you ever seen that religious people just lose their mind?
I can only tell you of two people in my life that are religious that have not done that.
That
I have never seen react this way.
Oh yeah.
That are just immaculate human beings all the time. And I attribute it to their belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is weird.
I've seen some holy people get fucking holy shit like this guy right? And I'm telling you, it's so funny. It's like all the frickin' hell! Or you know what I mean? Like they got some really bad Christian swear words, right? Right? It's really, really bad, man. If you're a Christian, you learn some good swear words.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing to look into if you feel like you ever want to deep dive into one of America's conspiracies. This is kind of like a black eye to American justice. For sure.
And you know what? It kind of was before internet, so it didn't get all the play everywhere that it should. No. What they managed to do is they managed to wordsmith the word cult into this that made everybody settle down, because we kind of, at this point, you got to remember in the past 10 years, so we're in 93, so the past 10 years, a lot of Christians have been roasted on the stake. Jim's Farwell and Jim and Tammy Baker. Yeah. Right? I'm sorry, please forgive me, right? Back in the day, right? So there was a lot of Christians getting burned at the stake. Yeah. And so, figuratively, right? So this was something else that was Christian related, religiously toned. Yeah. And it was another black stain on their precious.
And this is kind of when you had just started to hear about molestation cases within the Catholic. Just starting to hear about that kind of stuff. July 26, 1993, the Mars Observer took its first pictures of Mars and the Martian surface. And it's so phenomenal to think that this year, right now, as we speak, we have a rover on Mars that is sending back HD crystal quality video.
Crazy
Footage.
Wi-Fi on Mars, man.
It's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way. This is at this time some of the most groundbreaking stuff to ever happen to people on Earth.
Yeah. And we never asked the question why. No one asked why.
Yeah.
Oh, we're to Mars? No one said, well, why are we going to fucking Mars? Like, seriously, it's 1993.
Yeah,
like,
it's phenomenal.
We have a lot of other things we need to do right now.
It's phenomenal. We do, and we always will, but I think this is necessary for human beings. I think it's necessary for us to have these ideas and chase them. Because not everyone's doing everything, right? Scientists are meant to do this kind of stuff. We have brilliant people in place. I couldn't figure out how to get there. So we have brilliant people in place that do this kind of stuff for us. So we can sit back and be like, wow.
But do you ever think, like, why in 1993 is the Hubble telescope fresh on the scene? It's only been up there maybe a couple of years at this point. That's why we got that photo. Why Mars? Like, now here we are 30 years later. Mars.
Well,
like, why Mars? Why did they want it back then? Why is it still relevant?
It's so strange because back then we didn't even know what we know now.
They did.
Maybe they did. Because, Mars has frozen water, all these different things that Mars has that resemble Earth. I think we've kind of created a mystique about it because it's a red planet. I don't think we knew that it was just covered in rust at the time. I think if we knew back then that it was just covered in rust, I don't think there'd be a mystery to it. But we created such a stigma about it, and sci-fi movies, the Martians always come from Mars. It's always been that thing in our minds. But I think it's just the first step in us conquering the galaxy. Because we're so much closer now. We can see it live every day. You can go to NASA's website, if you believe in NASA, and you can see the Mars rover live every day, just traversing the planet. And this, at this time, when we first got these pictures, this was all just imagination. What's on there? What's on there? What's on there? And now we know.
Well, now we know what's going to be on there.
Which is pretty amazing.
Which is us. We're going to be on there. Well, not me, but
it's people.
Some future form of human will be up there.
And in 1993, it wasn't even a pipe dream. It wasn't even a pipe dream. It wasn't anything close to reality.
No.
No.
I just wonder why they singled Mars. Like, all through our culture, it's been about Mars. Like, have they known about Mars from the aliens 50, 60 years ago? Like, did they, because if you think about it, why has it always been Mars? All the aliens on TV, like you said, come from Mars. All of the planet, it's always been put on our head. If you ask any kid to name a planet, they name Mars probably. Earth, Mars, Saturn probably is next, is the rings, right? That's it. Pluto because it sounded like Disney back in the day, right? But Mars because it's a Mars.
I think it's just because it's red.
Yeah, maybe.
I think we're just that simple-minded.
Do you think we just picked it up and that's nice, right? Like,
that's weird.
That's red.
And it's really close to us compared to other planets.
Is that what it is? Yeah. So is Mars the next one to us?
It's the closest one to us. Yeah.
So maybe that's what it is, right? We're just like, screw it, neighbor.
It's realistic.
We're not going to get to anywhere else.
It's attainable.
Right? It's the closest one to our thing. It's cool, dude. I think, it's going to be one of those great moments when you find the first person, and we're going to see it, I believe, in our life, that set up a pod on Mars. Okay, I'm here.
Wow.
Like this little garage.
Wow. Can you imagine?
This little garage on Mars. Okay, I'm going to go outside now. Roger, 443. I'm going to go outside. Prepare for deep docking. Like, what are you going to do? Wait, what do you do? I'm going outside. What are you going to do out there?
Stare at the Earth.
I see some redness.
Can you imagine going to Mars just to look at Earth? That's so strange.
Alexa, what is there to do on Mars?
Interesting.
So they're selling us on research.
Interesting.
Oh, take a nice trip to Mars. Do some research.
We'll get deep.
Hey?
Do you think there's any actual outside of bacterial microbial life? Do you think there's anything in the planet Mars?
think there's the molecules or whatever. I'm not a scientist. But I think they're going to have to refine that and create water.
Interesting.
Because I think that there's the things necessary there. But I think what the main thing is the soil. I think they figured out something about the soil and about growth and growing shit. And about just other things, right? I think that there's something there about it.
Some kind of footprint.
Because I don't know what else we need. What else is, like, what are we
There's some theories that we came from there, and that's why we have a connection to it.
Oh God, no! I'm a conspiracy guy. I can't believe that much.
And the planet was dying, so we jumped on an asteroid and it hit Earth.
Fuck my life. That cannot be my legacy.
Can you imagine? Well, I mean, there's some weird correlating of these theories because 12,000 years ago, an asteroid did hit the planet, caused a mass extinction event.
Yeah.
And then humans are here.
Right? So we rode that and jumped off just before it hit or something?
I mean, we hit and found a way not to get incinerated by it.
Oh, wow.
And then buried ourselves in the bowels of the planet and eventually came out as us. Hi.
Wow. That's fucking craziest theory from the 90s I've ever heard. That's from someone from the 90s.
Wait, all of Earth next.
Oh, dude, but all I know is that I won't be alive to be going to Mars, or I'll be too old and I won't give a shit. I'll be that old guy sitting on the porch saying, I don't give a fuck where he's going. I'm staying here.
Right.
Right?
I can see it.
You got some politics here.
Yeah, so over my time getting a little bit older, really tried to find my connection to my original ancestry, which would have been in India. That's where my people would have originally came from before they migrated or were forcibly migrated to Fiji. And there's been this dispute essentially since the country was created as to what Kashmir is and what Pakistan is and what India is. And January 6th of 1993, there was a slaughter essentially of 55 Kashmiri civilians who were killed by Indian border security. Now, to give you some context, Kashmir is a place that has been disputed by people living in India and Pakistan for decades. And the reason why is because, like most disputed areas, they were created by the colonizers, which in this case would have been the British Empire, before they left their imperial decree was to how India should look like going forward. And they separated India based on religious identity. So India was predominantly Hindu population, and Pakistan was essentially the Muslims. And they were separated into these geographical areas. And Kashmir was a disputed area that both the Hindus and the Muslims wanted access to have as their own.
Oh, wow.
And they've been fighting about it essentially in murderous ways for now hundreds or decades now. Essentially since the British walked away. And the British Empire has a habit of leaving countries in despair and disarray after they've colonized them for hundreds of years. And this conflict still stands, still ongoing. You know, Modi as the Prime Minister in India is kind of trying to create an ethnic Hindu-only state where only Hindus can live in. And they've been kicking Sikhs and Muslims out of their homes, leaving them homeless. Essentially what Israel is doing to Palestine. But India can do it on a much larger scale because the population is massive.
That's crazy. They must get a kick out of that, eh? These guys that do it.
Well, India has nukes, right? India has nukes, so they don't really care what the rest of the world says about how they treat their people. Because essentially any country
they get nukes.
It's one of these deals that they worked out with the US and Russia. India and Pakistan both have nukes. India's like, well, Pakistan's gonna have them, we're gonna have them. Pakistan's like, well, if they're gonna have them, we're gonna have them. So now both sides have it, they both hate each other.
Wow, it's nuts.
Yeah, so this was one of the more tragic events of this time, and I think what made it more tragic is because the pictures that came back from the slaughter were horrible. And this is the same year that CNN kind of became like the peddler of tragedy, because the Gulf War as well.
Yeah, there was so much happening in these early 90s.
And there was so much video footage coming out of everywhere because the technology was becoming so much cheaper.
Yeah.
And having the access to send footage became incredible.
Yeah, because before that they had to it was hard to get footage back from. Oh, it's hard. It was hard to get footage back from there.
It had to be physical.
It had to be physical back then.
Yeah, you had to physically send media to the outlet and then play it.
We're filming. Oh, sit down there. You sit there.
I didn't know you were still going.
Oh yeah. Right. So yeah, it was crazy. I don't remember this. I can't really be honest and say that I remember all aspects of this day. I was young. I was 18. I wasn't really into politics as much as I am now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if it was a major sensationalized thing, I think back then, because we only had one TV.
And only like 4 news channels.
Yeah, 4 news channels, right? So, you know, me being me, I probably wouldn't have paid attention to this. And now as an adult, I see how crazy.
And honestly, I didn't either. I was 13, and the only reason it mattered in my household at all is because my parents' ancestors would have been from India. So the conflict was something that was mentioned in our house. But my parents didn't really know about it either. They just knew that Kashmir was a disputed area and that everyone on the borders hated each other and were ready to kill each other.
Yeah.
That's kind of all we really knew about it. So.
And I knew the sweater, and that's why I was like, oh, Kashmir. Right? I was like, oh, is that where they make the sweaters?
Definitely not.
It was not it. That was not where it was. That's crazy. Alright, let's try another one.
Rodney King.
This is one of your guys.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the most important people in civil rights. And I think what's really important to understand is that 1993 is not a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
28 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it took all the way up until 1993 to give this man a holiday says a lot about how slow we are to change.
Oh yeah.
Because, I mean, he passed away in the 60s. So it took 30 years for him to be recognized as somebody that was monumental enough to have his own day.
That's really interesting. Like, who made the movement for this? Like, who was it that...
I know his family was pushing for it for a
his
long time.
family was, eh?
Yeah, and I know there's civil rights leaders in the community like Jesse Jackson, and you know he was very vocal about getting MLK Day for a long time. And it took up until January 18 of 1993 for it to be normalized across all 50 states.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. Incredible day, incredible human, and I think now, if there was a civil rights hero that they were trying to get propelled into a spotlight of having a day, it wouldn't take very long.
Yeah.
Because the media is just so overwhelming, you wouldn't hear the end of it.
And when you hear people from all over the world now, you don't just hear people from that city or that country, right?
Yeah.
He's got a pretty famous face, if you were to look at MLK, eh? Like, his face is famous. Like, a lot of kids in these days know him. Like, they've done a good job keeping his image alive over the past 30, 50, 60 years.
Yeah, well, because the message hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And the mission hasn't changed to make the message a reality, right? They're still fighting the same battles. Civil rights leaders are still fighting the same fights in different ways, but it's inevitable. I think he's going to be a staple for us for the rest of our lives, for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Wow, 93, eh? That's when he got his when he got the day.
Yeah.
It seems like it was so much longer ago, but
it should be. It should have been.
It seems like I grew up with it. Like it's always been there.
But I think one thing we got to recognize is when he was alive, he wasn't liked.
No.
He wasn't liked by the establishment. They hated MLK.
Yeah.
So I think it just goes to show how the tide changed over 30 years.
Yeah.
And people that realized what they were thinking back then was not viable now.
I wonder if if the black community in 1993 felt the same as they do today. Like, I wonder if now, because another 30 years has passed, if education is more, like, people understand more. I wonder if people understood it back in 1993. Like, what was the reaction to Martin Luther King?
I think it would have still been, it would have still been as impactful because we still didn't have mass media the way we have it now. So his speech to 1 million people is still phenomenal in the 90s.
Yeah.
Whereas him speaking to 1 million people now, that's a big deal.
Yeah, because when was the Million Man March? Was that in 97?
With Louis Farrakhan.
Yeah, the first one.
That would have been the second one. This would have been the first one.
This was the first
one.
The
I Have a Dream speech with Washington. That would have been Louis Farrakhan's march. I think it would have been maybe the mid-90s.
Mid-90s.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. So then they had no one in this generation in 93 had a major movement. Like, if you were...
Not that represented them, no.
There was nothing. There was nothing for a long time. Probably the 60s, probably the last thing? 60s?
I mean, Jesse Jackson ran for president.
Yeah.
That was kind of a big deal.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
He was moving in that direction, but nobody took it seriously.
Yeah.
Nobody said he had a chance to
I
win.
remember that.
So, but he ran.
Yeah. I remember. Here's a guy I thought if he didn't have a sex and drinking and gambling and asshole problem, he could have ran for something. Amazing black leader. Hey?
The reason why he's on the screen is why he's amazing.
He's amazing. 93 was a pretty amazing year in Jordan. That was prime time.
This especially, June 20th, 1993.
Yeah.
MJ kills another Charles Barkley team.
Devastating.
Wins his third championship, his first three-peat, and then walks away from the game.
Yeah.
Just leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at this time his dad had been murdered,
Mm-hmm.
and he wasn't in a great place mentally.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bulls had, I mean, I don't want to say no competition, but the league didn't have another contender that was up and coming.
Yeah, it was different times.
Well, think about it. When MJ left, everybody thought they could win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And nobody said that team will win, that team. I think maybe the Knicks were kind of like the favorites.
Yeah, they sort of pretty much up
Ewing
there.
was kind of one of the favorites.
Yeah.
I think Reggie Miller was, the Pacers were one of the favorites.
Yeah.
No one saw the Rockets coming. Nobody had the Rockets forecasted to win.
That was a good team.
They were an 8 seed when they won
Yeah.
that chip, right?
Yeah.
So MJ had left with such dominance
Yeah.
and absolutely killed everybody in such a horrible way that the league was wide open when he left.
Yeah.
He left a giant hole. But the fact that he walked away on top, I think is what people remember it the most.
Yeah, it was a pretty phenomenal time because you didn't understand how someone could get bored at being the best.
Mm-hmm.
And that we never really experienced that before,
Oh, interesting.
right? We never experienced that in sports because he was bored.
Yeah.
That was his issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think before that, maybe, I don't know, I can't really pick out an athlete that had ever done anything similar to that, right? Like,
The left on top, none. I mean, Lemieux kind of did,
Mhm.
but then he came back again as an older player.
Yeah.
He was still good, but he wasn't Lemieux anymore, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that MJ came back twice afterwards
Mhm.
still doesn't diminish this.
No.
Still doesn't diminish leading on top because no one does it.
No.
I think GSP kind of did it.
Kind of did it a little bit.
Even though he came back, he didn't lose. He won another championship.
Yeah.
As psychotic as that sounds.
Yeah.
But
There's not many.
this was a drop the mic moment.
Yeah, and what's really special about this is that he still had it in him.
Oh,
And
for sure.
You knew he would still come back.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the thing. He's leaving, but you
There
knew
were some seeds.
he would still come back.
Well, I was a kid, yo. To me, he was a superhero,
Yeah.
and the cape was being put away. And you gotta understand, I wasn't a fan of Michael.
Mhm.
I was not a fan of MJ. I was a fan of Reggie Miller. I was a fan of Patrick Ewing, and he murdered those teams.
Yeah, he did.
But I knew that he was the best.
Yeah.
So when he walked away, a part of me was like, yes. A part of me was like, oh, but you're Superman.
Yeah.
Why are you leaving? And then we see he's going to play baseball. It's like,
Yeah.
what?
And he was not a great baseball
He
player.
was really bad.
And baseball is the hardest sport to play. There's no professionally, it is the hardest sport to play.
Oh,
Baseball is so precise.
right.
You need to be so precise on everything you do in baseball in order to be successful.
Right.
And these sports you can muscle through. He muscled his way through people in basketball.
Yeah, there's a lot of athletics towards it for sure.
Right? And sure there's a lot of science to it, but a lot of it is strength and muscle and endurance and
Especially at this time.
yeah. And he didn't get look at him. He wasn't like that his whole year, his whole life. He got that way with the chiseled look and everything, probably about 90.
After the Pistons.
Five years
down.
into his thing, right? He's like, screw this, I'm gonna
I
get
gotta get some
strong.
muscle. Yeah.
And baseball's complete opposite. But baseball's like a finesse sport.
Even as some saggy dudes play baseball.
Yeah, but they have finesse.
Yeah, it's true.
They you look at hitting a home run.
Yeah.
50% is power. The other is getting the ball precisely.
And they look the least athletic out of all major sports
Yeah,
organizations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard. So for him to go as a phenomenal athlete over to baseball, the skills in the body type and everything didn't register.
Yeah.
But I believe that if Michael had have done baseball from the beginning, he would be the best baseball
Oh, I
player
believe
of all
it.
time.
I believe it. I mean, even if he had a couple of more years at this crack at baseball, he would have gotten good.
He would have gotten good.
He wouldn't have been great, but as an athlete who he is, he just definitely would have gotten good.
Yeah.
And I think this is a testament to not having social media, because you didn't know where his head was at.
Yeah, definitely.
You didn't know what he was thinking, why he was feeling these things. There was no press about it. He was a very private person.
Yeah.
So all he gave you was that I'm done with basketball.
Yeah.
I don't feel like winning anymore.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Money and championships.
Yeah, I'm out. I got other things I want to do.
Yeah.
So monumental time in sports for every NBA fan, just basketball fans, period.
Yes.
Because the day that you heard he's back,
yeah, the fax machine.
when he came back,
Yes.
oof. But we'll get to 95.
Oh, that was such a good year. This was guy in 1993. This is my official autograph picture.
Amazing. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah. Put it offline. I'm just gonna put my own picture right there and put my face right there. Pavel Bure was, in my opinion, the most electrifying hockey player of all time.
That's big words, and I can almost concur. March 1st, 1993, he scored 2 goals against the Buffalo Sabres, getting him to the 50-goal mark, the first Vancouver Canuck to ever hit 50 goals.
I don't know if there's been another one.
No.
I don't think so.
No, wait. No. Didn't either of the Sedins hit? One of them went out, Ross, didn't they?
Alexa, how many Vancouver Canuck players have... Alexa, how many Vancouver Canuck players have scored 50 goals in a season? So you don't tell me what I want to know.
So yeah, I know we had McGillivray at one point. I don't think he did 50 with us. For some reason, I think one of the
Sedins.
because one of them got Art Ross.
Mm.
So unless they just had a shit ton of assists.
Oh, maybe. Who else did we have? We had Matt Sundin.
Yeah, no, it didn't even play that way for the Canucks. No,
We had like Mark Messier.
did not play that way for the Canucks. No.
Marcus Naslin.
Well, maybe Naslin hit 50.
That's a big mark.
I mean, Naslin was a sniper for a long time. What terrible hockey fans. Yeah. But at this time, I was a huge hockey fan.
Oh, it was huge. Pavel Bure was everything. Even when we played NHL 94 on Nintendo, right? Pavel was the guy to have. Sega, yeah. He was the guy.
It was light speed.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the first ever game that he played. I think he got like 8 shots on goal and didn't score. Mm-hmm. But he was flying up and down the ice in a way I don't ever remember seeing a hockey player skate.
Amazing.
Truly one of the most dynamic offensive threats in the history of hockey.
Yeah.
And he was kind of a tough guy. He could throw some hits.
He could, yeah.
He was a little bit of a pest.
A little bit of a womanizer.
You punch you in the face every now and then.
Yeah.
But yeah, Gino would check, right?
Yeah, Gino and Gino were buddies out on the street.
Just so weird because they're such polar opposites.
Yeah, they were, but you know what they had in common?
What?
Their love of cocaine.
Ah!
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes, and hookers. Right? And
bury and blow.
When you have
a
love of cocaine and hookers, it's a bro bond that never dies. Right? Until one of you do.
And he has a brother as well that also played in the NHL.
Valerie?
Valerie, please.
Valerie.
Excuse me. You ever seen that interview where someone called him Valerie? He's like, it's Valerie.
Oh no.
Yeah, she got offended.
Oh really?
Yeah. He doesn't like.
He married the girl from Growing Pains.
No, Full House.
Full House. Yes, Candace.
Candace Cameron.
Yeah.
Candace Cameron Bure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Growing Pains because her brother, Kirk Cameron.
Yeah. I'm older.
Used to be cool, and now is an absolute raving lunatic.
Douche to the nth degree.
He's out of his mind.
One day we'll have to go over what happened.
We have to.
90s people.
We have to cover Crazy Kirk.
God. But yeah, Bure. So I think the best moment I remember of Pavel Bure was the game-winning goal against Calgary.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And that's when he solidified himself as, you know.
Dude, that was honestly one of the most electrifying moments I've seen on TV.
Yeah. And I really feel for Pavel because I feel he got on to Vancouver, and Vancouver wasn't a winner, man. That 94 team was amazing, and I really believe that team should have fucking won.
Ownership did him dirty.
ownership did him dirty.
I mean, he wasn't the model citizen on the team either.
Yeah.
But when you got gold like that,
Yeah.
right, you got to kind of milk it till it stops.
Yeah.
And the ownership.
It's such a crazy business, the business of sports.
Yeah.
You know, you just take a guy in their prime and just use him, and then
use him to the drops.
We tried.
Yeah.
Like you look at teams basketball players get it the worst.
Not anymore though.
Not anymore.
This era for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like they were just being used, man.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these teams had no intention of trying to get better because of the guy here. They had no intention of trying to get better because you couldn't. You could spend all the money you wanted in the world to try to get someone to compete with that, but it didn't happen. So everyone knew back then.
Yeah.
You know, and it seemed like that in the '90s. Like it seemed like there were way more dynasties and there's way more teams that. You know.
Yeah, well, because the owners wouldn't let players go.
Yeah.
They could hold them ransom. It's either you play for us or your career's over, right? Now the players run the leagues, and I think if you are the product, you should run the league.
Yeah, I agree with it.
And I think now they have this to say so.
Yeah.
Because we lost a lot of legends in sports over the years because they didn't have control over their futures, right? Like Muhammad Ali was destroyed. Should never have fought his last 6 fights.
Yeah,
because ownership just sucked him dry, right?
You owe us some fights, Muhammad. You know?
Broken.
Speaking of legends.
One of the most disputed artists of all time, and the reason I say disputed is because he came up with arguably the most entertaining person in the world in Michael Jackson. But he was the polar opposite of everything that MJ represented.
Oh yeah.
He was wild, he was unique, he was not scripted, he was obsessed with women.
Yeah.
But himself was completely feminine. Was one of the most openly feminine looking men. Makeup, hair, assless pants.
Yeah.
Prince was revolutionary. And this symbol is revolutionary because on June 7th, he released that name of Prince to the record label that he worked for to become this artist formerly known as Prince.
Wow. And this was a huge time for musicians in history because this was somebody fighting back against a record label. Didn't happen a lot back then.
Well, they didn't own their careers. I think one thing the music industry in this era was synonymous for was artists being broke after they stopped making music. And I think that was across spectrums of music. Yeah. There were a few greats that, had their masters. I think back then Paul McCartney had all his masters. Like, some of the legends owned their own music. But for the most part, artists stopped making music and then they retired broke. Yeah. And addicted and destitute and all these horrible things. Yeah. That's why some of them perform until their 80s and 90s doing the same shtick over and over again. Yeah. And Prince was sick of it. And he said, forget it. And I think the most ludicrous thing is, we look at the symbol, and a lot of people know the symbol represents Prince. I think the most ludicrous thing is, he didn't win his masters back until he died.
Yeah, like last year or something.
Until 6 months before he died.
Oh, is that what it was?
So this was a battle for 30 years of him trying to get his masters. And the label just kept taking from him, and taking from him, and taking from him, and eventually...
Brutal.
Fought the power and won.
Eventually there will be no agents and managers and labels. It seems like even in the acting business where we are, having an agent seems so fucking stupid. It seems so stupid. You can go on these sites where the agents go to get your information, and you can do it yourself. And it seems, music figured it out that you don't need producers and studios anymore. You can just set up in your garage and produce your own shit, right? And so, this was the first time I can remember in history that somebody bucked back against the system. Yeah. And they tried to silence him and stop him from making music. Yeah. And they couldn't. He was too talented, he was too proficient. He played, 11 instruments, flawlessly, self-taught. So you can't keep talent like that down. And he set the stage for artists today to own their masters. He really did. Yeah. And, even back then, people didn't appreciate Prince.
They still don't.
No.
His guitar playing ability, no. I think he's overlooked. And I think he'll stay overlooked because he wasn't that cookie cutter, nice guy that everybody wanted him to be. He was a jerk to interviewers whenever he felt like it. Yeah. When he won awards, he was a jerk to people. He didn't care.
So he grew up in an era where there was just gay. So he was more... he would have been pansexual, I guess.
He was a kind of androgynous man.
He's androgynous.
Because you don't know whether he's male or female. He could skate the line very, very easily, right?
I wonder if he died with a secret. You know what I mean?
I'm sure there's a lot of secrets.
I wonder what secrets he died, because you can tell that guy had a lot of them.
But what's great though?
The legend.
I think the greatest things are stories that other celebrities tell about him.
Like the Chappelle shit.
Oh, that's just amazing. Chappelle just, and it's cool that that Chappelle got to hang out with him.
Yeah.
Prince was cool with it. He thought it was funny. Because for the most part, you couldn't make fun of Prince.
No.
Prince didn't play that shit. He would call you out. And it's weird because he was from a place like Minnesota, and he was a Jehovah's Witness. His whole life. Up until he died, he was a Jehovah's Witness.
That's crazy.
But not just a Jehovah's Witness, like knock on your door, Jehovah.
He was?
Yeah!
So all those girls he had around him, there was nothing happening.
No, there was stuff happening. He was a flawed Jehovah's Witness.
Oh, he was a flawed. He was a sinner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you imagine Prince coming to your door? Knock. No, he had a deep voice. He had a deep voice. He spoke like this. Hi. Can you imagine him coming to your door?
Hi,
Do you believe in God?
No, not God.
Jehovah. I would be Jehovah if Prince came to my house.
I would like Prince.
Just for a day.
Oh, sure.
Come on in. Hang out.
Just a sec, I'm gonna call my mom and all my friends and family. Hold on, they need to hear this too.
Let's convert everybody today.
Mom, Prince is here. He wants to talk about Joe. Alright?
So-
Make him some biscuits.
So before we head out of the 90s, if you're choosing MJ or Prince, who's your choice?
Do I want diamonds and pearls? Or do I want Billie Jean? Whoa, dude.
So hard.
Ooh, that's a toughie, man. Pretty young thing, be up to me, that sailor. Or do I want?
You don't have to be beautiful.
Oh, it's tough, man.
So
Purple
many good
Rain,
songs. Oh.
one of the best albums. I love it. Off the Wall, released at the same time. I love it.
So hard.
I'm still Michael. I love Prince. Prince has its time,
Mm-hmm.
but Michael, it almost seems like every song is a classic.
I get it.
I really don't like Prince has some eclectic shit where you
Lots.
listen to it and you're like sexy motherfucker.
Yeah.
Like,
Lots of
like-
eclectic off the
and
cuff.
some stuff that you can't just listen to.
Right.
You gotta be like a lover of Prince. to do
Right.
it. And I think that's the appreciation of Prince is that you are a lover of Prince.
Mhm.
Whereas Michael, you don't have to necessarily love Michael to listen to his music.
Facts.
Right? You can just
It's
enjoy
good
Michael
analysis.
and just kind of get into it. Whereas Prince, you have to have an intellectual.
You gotta study.
Yeah, there's an intellectual necessity that it takes to listen to Prince.
Oh, for
music.
sure. You gotta be curious.
You do.
Yeah. And if you're a Prince fan, just for your own viewing pleasure, check out Miguel. You
Oh,
know
yeah,
Miguel?
Miguel.
Miguel takes almost his entire act from Prince. He sings beautifully. I'm a big Miguel fan.
Yeah, big time.
But I'll show my daughter this because she loves Miguel. I'm like, yo, you like Miguel? Let me show you this. And I show her Prince on Prince live performance. And she's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's exactly the same. Like, yeah, Miguel borrowed heavily from Prince. But it's okay if you're gonna borrow from an icon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
the
great.
greatest form of flattery.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Just don't change your name to a symbol. 'Cause it's been done. No one's ever done that since.
and no one's important enough to do it now.
Who is important or big enough now that could change their name to a symbol?
Honestly, if I had to say one person, I think Kendrick could do it.
Oh, you think so?
I think Kendrick's created like an iconic presence for himself. Where if he just decided to flip to a symbol, I think Kendrick could rock it.
Oh, that's interesting. Didn't he just release a new album?
No, people are waiting.
Oh, there's something coming.
Anticipating Kendrick's release.
Who could make themselves a symbol? I think, I hate to say it, because I freaking hate, I said freaking, so you know I'm mad if I said freaking hate. Donald Trump.
Yeah, 100%.
Donald Trump could change his name to a T or to a symbol, and people would rock it.
Ew. They would make it their new cross.
Yeah.
100%.
I hope he's not listening, because I don't want to give him any ideas.
Copyrighted.
Yeah.
Copyrighted T.
Alright, and finally, here's your last one.
Oh wow, a legend of a different kind. And legendary for different reasons. And this year was busy for Pac. 1993, 3 different charges for the legendary rapper. April of 1993, he hit a rapper with a bat.
Yeah.
And I get it, Pac is that dude.
Yeah.
And you don't want to take him there because he's a loose cannon and is likely to go off. And the reason I'm saying this is because Mike Tyson is a crazy dude. Mike Tyson bit someone's ear. Mike Tyson had a pet tiger.
Yeah.
He said Pac is the craziest motherfucker he ever hung out with. He said they would hang out and Pac would jump on casino tables and threaten people. He was just a live dude all the time. So April, he hit dude with a bat, charges were dropped. Oh, he spent 10 days in jail, but then charges were dropped because everyone loves Pac.
Yeah.
October 1993, probably the thing that made Tupac the most infamous is his shootout with the cops. Now, a lot of rappers like to act like they're thugs and act like they're street and act like they have credibility in the world. Pac lived it. He lived it to the razor's edge. And on this event, conflicting stories, but one of the stories is Pac was driving down the street and he saw two white guys harassing some black dude that was homeless, and Pac heard them using racial slurs. He didn't like it, got his person to pull over, hopped out of the car, and approached these guys, said, "Hey, why are you harassing this dude?" Things kind of got out of control, and there was a shootout. Now, Pac shot both of these guys, one of them in the butt, and one of them in the abdomen. And it turns out that they were two off-duty cops.
It's fucking suckers. That's what happens, man.
He was
suckers get lit.
And now here's the thing. Here's one of the reasons why Pac becomes like this mythical figure.
Yeah.
Not only did he get into a shootout with two off-duty cops, shoot both of them, he went to court, represented himself in court, fought the case, and won.
Pretty amazing.
Walked out a free man after shooting cops.
Yeah. Never happened.
Ever. First of all, none of these rappers are smart enough.
Yeah.
Because Pac knew the law. You know, he grew up a black, his mom was a Black Panther. His lineage, his ancestry is revolutionaries. So Pac grew up this way, and he knew it, and he didn't care. He was fearless. Went to court, fought the case, walked out with a swagger. And then November 1993, probably one of the black eyes in his career, he was arrested for sexual assault. Now, this case to me is one of these cases where it's really hard to talk about what happened because nobody that's outside the room knew what happened. There's no cameras, no social media.
Yeah, it was a black era.
Yeah, it's kind of my word versus her word kind of deal. So the story goes, Tupac was in a club, approached by this woman. She gave him head on the dance floor in this club. They went back to his hotel room, and the woman got raped or sexually assaulted by 3 dudes that Tupac was with. Now, Pac says, I was in the room at the time. I don't know what happened. The craziest part was after this, the woman kept trying to get in touch with Pac. She tried to pursue a relationship with Pac after the fact. And obviously, at this time, you couldn't be a black celebrity and get away with any kind of sexual issues. Whatever it was, you're going to jail.
Oh, yeah.
So Pac got hit, was supposed to serve 4 years in prison, and Suge Knight bailed him out in 1.5 years-ish. And he eventually became a part of Death Row Records and released probably his most controversial material after that.
Oh, yeah, man. That was just a tough time, which started all the beef.
Yeah. And it really did make him a superhero because he got shot at 5 times, survived. It's like, what? How do you get shot 5 times and survive? And then eventually got shot at again. And people still don't want to believe he died.
Yeah, they still don't think
he died. Still think he survived the second shooting.
He's living somewhere because, his fame. And you gotta think, he only had a few $1 million, but back then it was a lot. But he's not gonna fake his death and go right in.
And you gotta remember, a few $1 million and only a few years of success.
Yeah.
Pac only became a star in 91.
Yeah.
So from 91 to 96, he was like a rocket ship of chaos.
Yeah, and you gotta remember he fell in. What's shitty is that he fell into a time where, we have the LA riots, so black people were considered violent. We had the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court judge court ruling where he was a sexual assaultist, who got off.
It's still a judge.
And still a judge. So people were not happy with the black community.
OJ,
that was 90s. 90s, that was later.
Yeah.
That was after this. Right? So, people were kind of mad about it. So here's a guy who is accused of rape. There was no question he did it in the eyes of the public.
There's no gray area.
There was none at that time. There was no, let's see and wait. And no, that was it. Michael Jackson, had been rumored at that point.
Had in first few investigations.
Right? Black people were not respected still at that point. And, and he fell into it.
Dude, he was bright.
Yeah, he was
He
smart.
was brilliant.
Yeah.
He was musical talent. He was an acting talent.
Yeah.
It was kind of, he set the stone. He set the trend for guys like Jamie Foxx, multi-talented, can do everything. Michael B. Jordan, all these guys that are kind of dabbling in different art forms. He really was the first. He modeled Versace on a runway.
Yeah.
This is a rapper
Yeah.
modeling Versace on the runway,
Yeah.
and then being the hardest guy on rap.
Yeah.
Talking the most outlandish stuff while being able to model at the same time.
And he was the first rapper to date a white person or like be involved with a white person, like Madonna, the whole thing with Madonna.
Yeah.
That never happened before with a black artist.
Nope.
Being with a white artist like Madonna, like
Not that high profile.
Not that high profile, right?
No.
And they just kind of had their thing, and then that was it.
Yeah.
Madonna's really got her claws in a lot of years,
Well,
she's like, I'm a celeb, I'm gonna bang them all.
In the 90s, that was kind of a benchmark. Madonna was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now it's like, like, you remember when she kissed Drake on stage?
Oh, yeah.
It looked like you wanted to vomit.
And I'm really not saying anything about, older women that still wear spandex. I mean,
do you, boo? It's all good.
Do your thing, but leave Drake alone.
Oh, that's disgusting.
I felt for Drake on that.
But in the 90s, Madonna was it.
Oh, yeah.
If you had Madonna, you're like, oh, damn.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Pac did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, it's really unfortunate what happened to him in 93. It was a really tough year for him, man.
Yeah.
Right? And I think even that sexual assault, like, I've heard lots of cases, some I believe, some I don't. Obviously, I don't believe this.
Yeah.
Like, he didn't need to. He didn't need to rape somebody. And
every woman wanted him.
Yeah, like, this chick was just so she couldn't have him.
She gave him head on a dance floor, in a club, in front of everybody.
That's crazy.
And I'm telling you, Pac was one of these dudes every guy wanted to be like,
Yeah.
every woman wanted to be with.
Mm-hmm.
He was one of these rare exceptions to,
Yeah, he was.
what was normal.
It's so crazy. The only good thing that Pac has with his death is that we remember him in his prime.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Right? Like, we remember him as a young man, had all the potential in the world.
Right.
And we don't know where it would have gone.
Yeah.
Right? We don't know what he would have done with his life. We don't know if he would have been killed.
Or would have been an Oscar winner.
Or would have been, a
Nobel
Grammy
Peace Prize winner.
Right?
Yeah.
Even Grammy winner.
Yeah.
Like, that came up. Eminem did it. But, the rap category was coming up when he got. It was just starting. It was just coming, right? Like, we would have had the Tupac Shakur Award, in music.
Oh, I can see it.
All the great things, but we didn't. We lost them early. We lost an early legend, and all we have is the best parts of it. We don't have any crap.
That's beautiful. And a lot of rappers wouldn't exist today if Pac was still rapping.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have had a lane. He would have had all the lanes.
Who would he have beefed coming out?
Well,
definitely Ja Rule.
Jay-Z wouldn't have had a career.
Jay-Z would
not have had a career. Pac would have murdered him.
Yeah.
Looked like a goof and killed him. I hate to say it because I love Jay-Z.
Yeah.
But a lot of these gangster rappers, Master P wouldn't have had a career because he was doing exactly what Pac was doing.
Cameron, thank God Cameron wouldn't have had it.
Yeah, a lot of these thug rappers, dude, they wouldn't exist because Pac was one of these guys that called you out.
Yeah.
If you were whack, he just openly called you. He didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's missing from hip-hop. I don't think a lot of dudes who do that call other rappers out, even if they kind of like subtly do it. Because the risk of violence is too high. I think that's a part of it.
And worse, the risk of social media canceling you is worse. The fans getting on you and demanding you apologize, or we're going to continue to troll you.
It's trash.
Imagine if you trolled Pac.
Oh.
Imagine if you would have trolled him at all. Dude, people don't understand.
He'd be the biggest social media superstar on the planet.
Bigger. He'd be like 50. I think 50 is like a big time troller.
Yeah.
I think he would have been that.
Yeah.
But it would have been way more creative.
Yeah.
50's doing what I think Pac would have done, but Pac would have done it 10 times bigger.
And it's because he lived it.
Yeah.
There was no fake.
No.
What you saw on camera is what you got off camera.
Yeah.
He was a wild man. He just lived that way. But I guess that's what happens when you're a wild man.
And how old is he in 93? He was 22?
I would have been 22 years old.
So today he would have been 50.
Yeah, dude, he was a baby. Wow. He was just a kid. My kid's going to be 20 this year. Pac was a kid.
Yeah. Really sad. Probably the saddest legend I think we've lost.
Very sad. For sure.
Right,
I'll never forget the moment. I remember him dying. I'll never forget the moment.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
What a way to end the 90s.
Yeah, beautiful. Always great to end on Pac.
It is good. I mean, we should do that more often.
Yes.
find some way to fit pocket.
Up until he passed.
Up until
it makes
97.
sense. You're in the news all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Join us for High Praise. We do High Praise every week.
Praise.
What did I say?
High praise. He's turning it into a church podcast.
Lord, thank God, save me now. You can find me at ACDJ Vancouver on all social media. And you can find this gentleman right here. It's ALITE. It's Alite.
Got it.
On all social media, man. We're there. We're going to go up today and film a little something for High Praise.
At the Heat Vault.
We got a good vault. Who we got on?
Darren Fay from the Heat Vault.
From the Heat Vault.
Yes.
This is dope. You guys will see a video on social media. Make sure you check it out. Like it. Please subscribe. Follow us on all the platforms that you think that we'd be on. We probably miss a lot because there's so much shit to do. Man.
Too much.
We need a 19-year-old.
It's the 90s ride, yo.
We need a kid born in the 90s to kind of come and help us, dude.
Yes.
Hey. Alright, so if you're going to ride, man, ride in the 90s.
Make it a 90s ride.
Make it a 90s ride.
Hell yeah.
I'll see you next week.
Peace.